Well, yay. So here's another reason why that video wasn't too great. And it also gives a little bit of education about why some of these figures are considered O-rings. And the reason why is because from the early 80s, 82 I believe, to about 1993, and then again when they tried to give us T-crotches, and T-crotches are basically when the legs are not round like this. Instead, it's a square, and the legs kind of lift only sideways. Um, but because it's an O-ring figure, which is actually just a washer inside that keeps, there's a hook in most G.I. Joes, and that hook holds on to one end of the washer, and then the washer goes up through the figure and wraps around a peg in there, and that's what keeps the G.I. Joe together. So let's try and show that without breaking it. Let's see. Trying to show you a better angle. But anyway, right there, you can see that it kind of is separating. There we go. So it separates. And that's one reason that a lot of collectors like G.I. Joe is because of that O-ring. It gave great leg movement. And it's probably expensive to do it because whether they have a machine or they have to have a person do that, it's a lot more expensive to try and get it wrapped in and have another part versus just getting a T-crotch, which has just these two legs attached to a square in the middle of the legs. So that's one reason why I like G.I. Joe, and I'm not a big Star Wars fan, because even to this day, Star Wars figures still have T-crotches. They may be getting a little bit better where it's still a T-crotch, and then they've added a joint to the inner leg so that way it can lift up sideways. But normally, Star Wars figures only will be able to move their legs forwards and backwards. Now, the one reason to give that little education right there is because I couldn't figure out why in my For America review, or not review, but video, it wasn't working for me. And the reason why is because, I hope you can see that. Let's get some light. This rubber band is pretty much just a large O-ring, and it would originally go from here to there. And I'm thinking when you pushed the lever right there, it would release the tension, and that would cause everything to put on top of the lever. So all this stuff would have slid down and been concealed somewhat. But because I don't have a rubber band there, because it's broken, the tension's not there. So that's kind of one reason why some people that don't blame Hasbro when they don't make O-rings figures anymore is because if this happened to quite a bit of kids when they were growing up, the rubber band broke, then you had this figure that no longer had any legs because the whole lower legs and the middle section would have just come loose. And so they tried to do T-crotches many times throughout the G.I. Joe line, but thankfully there was enough collectors that wrote letters or voiced their opinions, and even now we don't have T-crotches anymore. We don't get too many gimmicks that are tied into the figure, so we still get lots of articulation. They tried to do it in 2001, I believe, when they relaunched the line after it had been on hiatus since like around 1995. Thankfully Toys R Us has, no matter what people say about it, and even I have a hard time finding stuff at certain Toys R Us's, they have always stood by the line, and it's because of the fans that went and bought and talked about the Toys R Us exclusives between 96 and 98, I believe, that G.I. Joe is back on the line shelves, and why we have a G.I. Joe movie. What is that? Almost 11 years ago? I think that's right. So that's really cool. And the other thing too is we do, for the most part, people that do customs, and that's basically taking a G.I. Joe figure and switching out the arms, the legs. There's some guys out there that can mold new arms and heads, and I mean, it's just amazing what some of the customizers out there do. I mean, anything that you can do to a piece of furniture or a car kind of gives you an idea of what some of the collectors out there that are real artists can do with an O-ring figure. And that's the other thing too I can say, is that there's a screw in most figures' backs. And I say that because some of the ones that have a gimmick don't have that screw. So what you would do is you would unscrew the screw, and that would split the upper torso in half, and that would separate the O-ring and on, and then you could, you know, right in here there's more screws, and you can split that apart, and the legs down here come apart, and so there's just so much stuff that you can do with it. And with a T-crotch, I'm sure if you do the boil and pop method, which is basically taking a figure and putting it in a certain temperature of hot water, and that loosens the plastic enough that you can literally, because of these being plastic now, and the joints are held together now just by having a peg go through a hole, you soften that enough and you can pop the figure apart. But with T-crotches, you can't always do that because they're sometimes glued, you know, the parts are glued together, and somebody that does customizing would be able to explain that better than me. But that's one reason that the O-ring has always been something that we've really fought for. And thankfully, now with the rise of Cobra figures, which I will get into later, even though a lot of people already are doing so many reviews on those, thankfully Hasbro is able to find a way to incorporate the lower part of the articulation, even though we no longer have an O-ring inside the newer G.I. Joes. But the only thing now is that they are no longer held together by a screw in the back, so it's not as simple as just unscrewing the figure's screw and being able to customize it. Now you have to actually boil it, get it soft enough, and then you have to cut down the sides, and you know, it's just, there's things online that you can find if you're wanting to learn how to do that. But I don't do much customizing because already trying to buy the figures and then the comics and all that, I couldn't imagine trying to buy X-Acto knives and Dremel tools and all the other things that it takes to be a customizer. Plus, I'm not much of an artist when it comes to that, but I think that's one reason why I appreciate so many of the customizers out there, because they're able to do amazing things with their talent, and a lot of people even buy their customs, and a lot of people might even sell their customs on eBay. But anyway, so all because I couldn't get this thing to work made me say, hey, maybe I'll, even though most people watching this video will already know all this stuff, I was like, hey, I can explain why my video wasn't working. So we'll have to try and find some type of rubber band to replace that. But anyway, that's my video explaining the O-ring and why my For America was not being nice in the last review. Alright, thanks for watching.